They say home is where you find peace. For me, it was where my peace ended. The neighborhood I moved into looked perfect: clean streets, trimmed lawns, shiny mailboxes with gold numbers. But beneath that order was control. The homeowners association ran everything, from paint colors to parking spots. The president, Linda Hayes, was the kind of woman who smiled like she owned the air you breathed. I could tell from the day I signed the papers, I wasn't going to be one of them. I moved in quietly, didn't say much, didn't need to. After all, I spent most of my life enforcing law and order, not dealing with suburban politics. But peace never lasts long where pride hides behind power. The first warning came the day I parked my black SUV in the driveway. A letter taped to my door: unregistered vehicle. HOA violation. The SUV had government plates, but Linda didn't bother checking. To her, it was just another man breaking her rules. I ignored it. Then came another letter, this one more personal. "You're not above the law," it said. That made me laugh for the first time in weeks. If only she knew. That Friday afternoon, I stepped outside wearing my tactical jacket, the one with the U.S. Marshal badge clipped on the front. I was heading to a federal briefing downtown, but Linda saw me before I could get in the car. She froze, then smirked, then pulled out her phone. Minutes later, I saw flashing red and blue in my rearview mirror. 3 local cops walked up, swagger heavy, smiles sharp. "Nice costume," one said. "You playing pretend today?" They surrounded me like I was some criminal on his front lawn. I handed them my badge. The younger one squinted. "Fake," he muttered. "Good quality, though." I could feel Linda watching from her porch, arms crossed, phone still in hand. When they asked me to step aside for questioning, I didn't argue. I'd seen this before: people blinded by ego, convinced they're the law. But what they didn't know was, the real law was standing right in front of them. They laughed while running my plates. I stayed silent. Then the radio crackled. "Chief's en route," the officer said, tone suddenly shifting. The laughter stopped. The sound of the approaching siren echoed differently now, slower, heavier, like something was about to break. As the chief stepped out of his cruiser, I saw his face, a man I hadn't seen in years. His eyes widened the second he saw me. He didn't even reach for his radio. Instead, he walked straight to me and said, "Sir. I didn't know it was you." Silence swept the street. Linda's smile faded. The officers straightened up, realizing they'd mocked the man their own department trained under. The chief turned to them and said, "You're talking to the U.S. Marshal who wrote half your manual." I could have shouted, could have made a scene, but I didn't. I simply looked at Linda and said, "Next time you want to check someone's badge, start by checking your facts." That day, I thought the drama was over. But I was wrong. The HOA wasn't done, and neither was I. Humiliation spreads faster than any rumor. By Monday morning, the whole neighborhood knew what happened: how the HOA president called the cops on a federal marshal. Some laughed, some whispered, but everyone watched Linda Hayes like she'd been dethroned. Her pride was cracked, but not broken. People like her never surrender. They rebuild their ego, brick by brick, using other people's pain as mortar. For a few days, things went quiet. My mail stopped coming late, no new violation slips appeared on my door. I thought maybe she'd learned her lesson. I was wrong. The silence was just her planning her next move. It started small, subtle changes. My trash bins, once picked up every Tuesday, were mysteriously skipped. The security gate at the neighborhood entrance wouldn't open when my car approached, even though my keycard was valid. Then came the looks. Neighbors who used to wave now turned away, like they'd been told something about me, something they were afraid to believe, but too curious not to. One night, I found an anonymous letter shoved under my door. The handwriting was neat, the words sharp: "Federal or not, you're still subject to HOA law." We don't want trouble here. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need it to be. Linda had started a whisper war, not through rules or fines, but through fear. I'd seen it before, in smaller towns with smaller minds. You strip away the uniform, and every authority figure looks the same, desperate for control. The next HOA meeting was held 2 blocks down in the community center. I showed up early, quiet, wearing plain clothes this time. As I walked in, the chatter died. Linda stood at the podium, papers in hand, smile rehearsed. Before we begin, she said, we need to address a matter of safety and integrity in our neighborhood. She didn't say my name, but every word was aimed straight at me. Recently, an individual misrepresented himself as law enforcement, she said, glancing around as if gauging who believed her. We've confirmed no record of his position at the local level. A few heads nodded, most stayed silent. I let her finish. Then I walked forward, slowly, and placed a single folder on the table, official U.S. Marshal documentation, with federal insignia. If you're done with rumors, I said calmly, you can start with facts. The room went still. Her face flushed red, but she didn't back down. We just want to make sure everyone follows the same rules, she said tightly. No special treatment. I smiled, small, controlled, deadly quiet. Good, I said. Then follow your own. I left the folder there, walked out without another word. But as I stepped into the parking lot, I noticed something strange, a man sitting in his car, watching me. Not a neighbor. Not a cop. Just watching. When I looked his way, he started his engine and drove off slowly. The next morning, my tires were slashed. All 4. The HOA claimed it was, probably kids. I knew better. Linda wasn't just angry anymore. She was desperate. And desperate people don't fight fair, they destroy quietly. That night, I stood by my window, lights off, watching her porch across the street. She was on the phone, pacing, gesturing. Her voice carried faintly through the night air, he thinks he's untouchable. We'll see about that. I'd dealt with drug lords, fugitives, and killers. But I'd never seen malice burn so cleanly behind a neighbor's smile. And as I watched her close her blinds, one thought settled heavy in my mind. The real war hadn't even started yet. The next few weeks felt like a slow-motion ambush. Every sunrise brought something new waiting for me, a ticket, a note, a rumor. A city inspector appeared one morning, claiming he'd received an anonymous report about my property being unsafe. He walked around, snapped photos, and left without saying much. 2 days later, the county sent me a notice, violation of residential code, potential fine up to $5,000. I didn't need to ask who had filed it. The HOA seal was faintly visible at the bottom of the complaint, like a signature of arrogance. I'd spent my career studying people, fugitives, informants, liars, and I'd learned that the most dangerous kind of enemy is the one who hides behind paperwork. Linda was done using insults, now she was weaponizing procedure. So, I did what I was trained to do, observe, record, wait. Every night I wrote down the times her lights turned on, who visited her, what cars came and went. I installed a small camera on my porch, the same kind we used on stakeouts, pointed not at my own house, but across the street. I wasn't hunting for revenge, I was collecting proof. Still, the tension clawed at me. When I drove to work, I could feel eyes following my car. Twice I was pulled over by the same patrol officer who had mocked me weeks ago. Routine check, he'd say with a smirk. The second time, I asked for the citation in writing. He hesitated. Orders from above, he muttered. I smiled. Orders from Linda, I thought. She'd managed to turn local police into her pawns. But she'd made a mistake, she'd forgotten who I really reported to. That evening, I went down to the station, not the local precinct, but the federal field office. My badge, the same one she'd once called fake, slid easily through the scanner. Inside, the air felt different, cold, certain. I sat across from an old friend, Deputy Chief Morales, and laid out the file, photos, timestamps, recordings, every instance of harassment. He listened quietly. "You want us to handle it?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. I just need it documented. When she finally crosses the line, I'll make it official." By the time I left, the city lights had dimmed into a blur. It was strange, how a place could look so peaceful while rotting from the inside. Back home, I found another note taped to my garage: "This neighborhood was peaceful before you." This time I didn't tear it down. I pinned it to my fridge. A reminder. A few nights later, the sound of tires crunching on gravel woke me. Headlights cut through my curtains. I peeked outside, 2 cars parked outside Linda's house. 3 men stepped out, one carrying a small box. They moved quickly, whispering. I turned on my porch camera feed, zoomed in. They were planting something near my fence. Small, metallic. When they drove off, I waited 5 minutes, then stepped outside with a flashlight. Buried halfway under the dirt was a phone, broken screen, smeared fingerprints, and a bag of white powder beside it. They weren't just trying to harass me anymore. They were framing me. The next morning, Linda was already outside, talking to an officer. I saw the look she gave me, like she'd already won. I didn't confront her. I didn't argue. I simply locked eyes with the officer, nodded politely, and went back inside. Then I called Morales. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask questions. He just replied, "We'll handle it." That night, I placed the fake evidence, the phone, the bag, on my kitchen counter and snapped a few photos of my own. Because when people like Linda try to play law, they never expect the law to be watching back. By dawn I'd already made my choice. No shouting, no threats, just patience. That's what breaks people like Linda. They expect fury. They never see silence coming. I called Morales again that morning. This time he brought a small federal task group under a different pretext: property fraud surveillance in the area. We'd use my neighborhood as the test site. He smiled when I told him who the fraud suspects were. "Poetic," he said. For 3 days we prepared the trap. I left everything outside exactly as they'd planted it: the broken phone, the plastic bag, the patch of turned soil near the fence. Only now, hidden inside my porch light, was a microcamera broadcasting directly to the field office downtown. If they came back to discover their planted evidence, the lens would catch every movement. Linda couldn't resist attention for long. By the 4th day she scheduled a special HOA safety inspection. 7 people showed up, 5 board members, a local code officer, and, of course, the same patrol cop who had pulled me over twice before. They walked up my driveway like they were serving destiny itself. Linda carried a clipboard, the officer carried a grin. "Routine check," she said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "Just ensuring everything here is lawful." I let them wander. They circled the fence, pretending to measure distances, then Linda pointed dramatically. "There," she said. The officer knelt, brushed the dirt, and pulled out the same phone and bag he'd helped plant. He held them up like trophies. That was the cue. 2 black SUVs turned the corner, engines low, lights off until the last moment. When they flashed their blue strobes, Linda's face drained of color. Federal agents stepped out, badges gleaming in the morning sun, the same crest she'd called fake weeks ago. Morales led them. "Ma'am, step away from the evidence." Linda stammered, What is this?" "An ongoing federal investigation," he replied. "Tampering with evidence, falsifying reports, conspiracy to obstruct justice." The board members froze, the patrol cop tried to speak, but Morales held up a tablet. On-screen footage played, clear as daylight, showing the 3 men from that night burying the items. One of them was the same officer. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalks went silent except for the wind. I stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing. Linda's clipboard slipped from her fingers and hit the driveway with a hollow clap. Morales turned toward me. "Marshal, you want to read them their rights, or should I?" I shook my head. "Let them hear it from someone they trust." He began reciting the Miranda warning while agents guided the officer and Linda toward the SUVs. The board members scattered, muttering excuses. Someone filmed it, I didn't care. Truth has its own way of spreading. When the cars pulled away, I finally exhaled. For the first time since I'd moved here, the air felt clean. But victory never comes without residue. The next morning, neighbors left notes on my porch, apologies, invitations, even baked pies. I appreciated them, but part of me stayed guarded. People's loyalty changes with headlines. I walked the street in silence. Every shuttered window reminded me how quickly fear becomes entertainment. Back inside, I looked at the badge resting on my table, scratched, a little dulled. I remembered the laughter of those officers, the smugness of the HOA. Then I remembered the chief's face when he saw the real ID. Justice, I realized, isn't about punishment. It's about memory. And this neighborhood would never forget mine. Still, something in me hesitated to call it finished. I'd won, yes, but I'd also drawn a line that others might someday try to cross again. Power attracts power. And somewhere beyond those perfect lawns, someone new was already whispering that I didn't belong here. Weeks passed, but the tension never truly left. Even after the HOA president and the corrupt cop were taken away, there was a hush that lingered in the streets. Law-abiding neighbors resumed waving, children played on trimmed lawns, and the mail came on time, but every evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I could feel the quiet eyes of those who had once doubted me. Curiosity, respect, and a hint of fear. I spent my mornings walking the neighborhood, badge tucked safely inside my jacket, eyes scanning, observing. The street seemed smaller now, safer, yet somehow different. Power had shifted, and those who once held it in a chokehold were gone, or humbled. Linda Hayes was no longer a fixture, her office at the HOA lay abandoned, papers scattered, phone lines disconnected. The echo of her dominance was gone, but her absence was also a warning. People like her don't disappear, they adapt. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. Outside stood the chief. His uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to see how you handled the aftermath," he said. "The way you collected evidence, stayed calm, and executed the plan, that was impressive. Most would have gone in guns blazing." I shrugged. "Patience does most of the work. Ego does the rest." He smiled faintly. "This neighborhood owes you more than they know. You've restored the balance, not just punished the guilty." I invited him in, poured coffee, and we watched the quiet street through the bay windows. A group of HOA board members, new, cautious, respectful, passed by, waving politely. The difference was clear: power is effective only when wielded wisely, and justice earns attention, but respect is earned silently. Later, I walked outside to my SUV, parked in its rightful spot, black and gleaming in the afternoon light. It felt surreal, how a badge, once mocked, had reshaped a community. I thought about the first day Linda called the cops, the laughter, the sneering faces, the fear I had witnessed in my neighbors as they were swayed by lies. And now? Silence. Respect. Even fear in the right measure. I glanced at my porch camera, still recording, a habit, a precaution. Every so often, the world forgets that vigilance is part of protection. I smiled faintly, knowing the evidence would remain, a silent testament to what had transpired. Then I walked toward the fence, looking across at the empty lot where Linda's office had once stood. It occurred to me how fragile control is when built on lies. I thought about the years I had spent enforcing law, guiding others, balancing chaos. And I realized, in that moment, that sometimes, the law isn't enough, sometimes, a person must embody it quietly, patiently, strategically. The sun dipped lower, painting the neighborhood in gold and shadow. I stood there for a moment, the wind brushing against my face, feeling a rare kind of peace. The HOA had been humbled, the corrupt officer removed, and the neighborhood finally returned to a state of normalcy, at least externally. As I turned back to my home, the chief's words echoed, balance restored, respect earned. I knew the truth, justice is not always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet, precise action that leaves the deepest mark. And here, in this perfectly manicured neighborhood that once mocked me, that lesson would never be forgotten. I slipped my badge back into its holder, tucked it safely inside my jacket, and walked back inside. There was work elsewhere, sure, but for now, this street, this little pocket of chaos and pride, was mine to protect, silently, wisely, and forever remembered.